Now, the people who make the laws that govern cyclists usually don't ride bikes themselves. So I'd argue they don't really have much of an idea what they're talking about. They make the mistake of thinking that a bike is a little car, so the laws that apply to cars should apply to bikes too. We should have licenses, rego, number plates. The government brought in some new penalties aimed at cyclists, and I'd argue that most of these made the same mistake of thinking that a bike is a little car. I'll give you a couple of examples. If you ride your bike without a bell and you get caught, $106 fine. Now, the theory is a car needs a horn, therefore a bike needs a bell. Now, if you've ridden a bike, you know you've got this thing called a voice. Nevertheless, that's the fine. If you go through a red light on a bicycle, it's the same fine as if you went through a red light in a car, $425. Doesn't matter what the red light was, whether it was a busy road or a quiet road, it's the same fine. Now, the typical car weighs about, 20 times what a typical bike weighs? It goes about 3 to 4 times as fast. If you've studied your physics, you know that it's force is velocity times momentum. You've got a lot more force when you're driving a car than you do in a bike. So I think it's crazy to compare these two things together. Bicycles going through red lights are treated exactly the same as a car going through a red light. But often they don't take into account the different factors and circumstances that apply to bikes. This is taken on my journey to work when I'm sitting in a bike path at a red light. So the cars have a green light, but the bikes have a red light. How does it help anybody? How am I helping? I've got clear vision in 360 degrees. I could easily go through, and in some US states you can. You can stop at a red light, and if it's safe to proceed, you treat it like a stop sign and you continue through. Now, a lot of car drivers think that's ridiculous. Why can you choose when you go through a red light? We already allow it sometimes. We already allow drivers to come up to a red light, decide that it's safe, and proceed through. So we've got a framework in place where this isn't so crazy. A red light doesn't always mean a red light. Now, the problem is because we treat bikes like they're little cars, we expect them to be on the road with all the other cars. And that's fine for some people, mostly men. A lot of women find this very intimidating. They don't want to ride on the road with all of the cars and the trucks and the taxis and all the craziness. There's a simple solution. We put a separated bike path where this cyclist is next to a 20-ton truck, but is separated by a concrete barrier and some nice safe metal. That's what we need to do. We need to put in bike lanes if we want people to feel safe when they're riding bikes, and don't treat them as if they're a little car. Unfortunately, in Sydney, we don't put in bike lanes, we rip them out. And as we're putting in new ones, we say, well, the cyclists can have one when they pay for it. They should pay for these bike lanes, like we pay for the roads in our cars. That is the greatest story that's ever been told, that drivers and cars pay for the roads they get. $60 billion worth of new roads are going in. Do you think that came from your CTP and your rego and your license? It's coming from the general pool of taxes, which everybody pays, including cyclists. Now, funnily enough, pedestrians aren't expected to travel a few centimetres away from speeding cars and to pay for their own infrastructure. I think part of the reason is because a lot of drivers are also pedestrians, whereas they're not also cyclists. Now, believe it or not, if you make it hard for people to cycle and you rip out the bike paths and you find them when they do, people stop cycling. The problem with this is there's safety in numbers. The more people that cycle, the more likely a driver is to know someone who cycles, and the less likely they are to think, bloody cyclist, I'll run them off the road, because their mum cycles or their daughter or whatever, their friends. Look at Amsterdam, where it's such a friendly place to cycle. Bike paths everywhere, you can do it without helmets, there's no crazy fines over there. The way cycling is perceived in Amsterdam is it's a way to get around. You cycle to the shops, you cycle to school, you cycle to work. It's just a means of transport. But in Sydney, cycling's aggressive. You do it in a pack, wearing lycra, and you do it all together, and it's not a friendly thing to do. Now, when you say this to people, they say, well, that's easy for Amsterdam. We're not Amsterdam. But you forget that neither was Amsterdam. 40 years ago, they had traffic problems just like we do. They didn't have a bike-friendly culture, just like we don't at the moment, and they spent a lot of time and effort in making it friendly for cyclists. So the message today, if you're not a cyclist and you see a cyclist, don't think bloody cyclist, just think that's one less car, one more seat on the bus, one more seat on the train, and they should be in bike lanes because then they're not on the road and they are safe. Really, the final message is bikes are not the same as cars. They're a completely different means of transport. They're probably closer to pedestrians than they are to cars. So please don't think of them as little cars. Thank you.